The sun was barely up, and the streets of Manila were already alive. I was running late, wrestling with the idea of booking a grab or taking a jeepney. Something tugged at me to take the cheaper, more chaotic option, an old habit, maybe, or something deeper. As I stepped onto the back of the jeepney, the usual scent of engine oil and morning pan diesel filled the air. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, my hesitation and my choice, would shape everything that came after. It felt ordinary, but so do most beginnings. I squeezed between a vendor with boxes of tomatoes and a quiet old man who clutched a worn leather notebook. He looked like someone from another time, sharp bearing, polished shoes, and eyes that had seen too much. Without looking up, he said, "You look like someone who's searching for something but doesn't know what." I froze. How did he know? That sentence cracked something inside me that I'd carefully sealed for years. As the jeepney bounced over potholes, he leaned in and asked, "Are you happy with where you are?" My instinct was to nod, to smile, to lie politely. But something in his tone disarmed me. I looked out the window, watching children chase each other barefoot by the sidewalk, and whispered, "I don't know anymore." He nodded like he'd heard that before, from many, maybe from himself once. That moment planted a seed of uncomfortable truth in me. We passed landmarks I'd seen 1,000 times, but this time I wasn't seeing them, I was seeing through them. The man opened his notebook and showed me a page, a quote scribbled in neat cursive, "Direction is more important than speed." He told me he used to be an executive who chased success so fast he lost sight of why he started. A crash, literal and metaphorical, made him rethink everything. That ride was starting to feel less like a commute and more like a classroom on wheels. Without warning, the jeepney broke down near an unfamiliar barangay. The driver apologized and waved us off. I groaned inwardly, annoyed at the delay, but the old man simply smiled. Sometimes, breakdowns lead us exactly where we need to be. We walked together in silence, and the longer I listened to the rhythm of the streets, the clearer my thoughts became. Inconvenience turned into insight. I realized maybe I needed this detour, not just in my ride, but in my life. We stopped by a roadside cafe, one of those quiet, tucked-away gems only locals know. The old man insisted on buying me a cup of Kapeng Barako. "Every journey deserves a pause," he said, sliding the mug toward me. In that small gesture, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the warmth of the coffee or the warmth of being seen, really seen, for the first time in a long time. He unfolded a hand-drawn map from his notebook. No names, no roads, just paths and symbols. "This is how I find my way now," he explained. "By feeling, not by following." That confused me. I'd lived by schedules and calendars. But something about his method, chaotic, yet deeply intuitive, made me wonder what I'd lost by clinging too tightly to structure. He asked me what I wanted when I was 10. I laughed. No one had asked me that since childhood. "To write stories," I said. "To inspire people." He didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded and said, "Then why did you stop?" And just like that, guilt replaced the laughter. It was a question I hadn't dared ask myself in years. As we walked, he pointed at a young tricycle driver singing with reckless joy. "You see that? That's what it looks like to be alive." It struck me that I had stopped celebrating simple things. Somewhere between meetings and milestones, I had forgotten to smile without reason. His words were peeling off layers I didn't know were there. Eventually, we flagged down another jeepney. This one was older, louder, and somehow warmer. I noticed how the passengers greeted each other like neighbors. "In life," he said, "you either ride alone or ride with stories." I realized I had been doing too much of the former, collecting titles, not moments. A little girl on the jeepney offered me a candy. No words, just a toothy smile. I took it, humbled. "She's richer than most," the man whispered. "She knows how to give freely." I hadn't given anything without expecting something in return for years: attention, praise, status. That candy tasted like a quiet lesson in humility. For long stretches, we didn't talk. But it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The kind of silence that holds space for thought, not emptiness. It made me realize how rarely I allowed silence in my life. I filled every gap with noise, TV, music, endless scrolling. Maybe that's why I hadn't been listening to myself. He showed me a photo of him as a young man, suit, briefcase, smile. I thought I had everything. His voice cracked slightly. But I didn't have me. That hit hard. I'd been wearing my own masks, convincing everyone, including myself, that I was doing fine. Maybe it was time to look underneath. "Sometimes," he said, Change doesn't look like fire. It looks like a bus breaking down and a stranger talking to you. That thought stayed with me. We expect transformation to be loud, dramatic, and obvious. But maybe life changes in whispers, not shouts. Rain began to fall, sudden and heavy. The passengers groaned, pulling out makeshift plastic tarps and bags to cover themselves. I laughed, soaked but strangely light. The man grinned. You can curse the rain or dance in it. It wasn't just a metaphor, it was a challenge to my perspective. We stopped in a district he once lived in. Let me show you something, he said. We walked past rusted gates and crumbling walls until we reached a tiny library. This is where I found myself again. Books lined the shelves, donated, dog-eared, loved. He had rebuilt his identity one page at a time. A woman with a sack of vegetables struggled to climb into the jeepney. I helped her up, and she smiled like I'd saved her day. That's the thing about kindness, the man said. It feels small to you, but it's heavy to someone else. I tucked that thought into my heart. As we neared a busy intersection, the man tapped the railing. This is my stop. My heart sank. I wasn't ready to let go of this unexpected mentor. He handed me the leather notebook. Keep it. Your turn now. Then he stepped off, vanishing into the crowd like he'd never been there. But he had. My world was no longer the same. Inside the notebook were blank pages and one final message: use this to write your way back to yourself. It felt like a baton passed in a relay I didn't know I was running. I stared at the empty page, unsure how to begin. But that was the beauty of it. I finally had something worth writing about, me. Back home, everything looked the same, but I wasn't. I moved slower, noticed more. Even my family sensed it. My sister said, "You're smiling more." That jeepney ride didn't just transport me across the city. It moved something inside me I didn't know needed moving. The next morning, I took the long way to work. By jeepney, again. I greeted strangers, made eye contact, and even gave away my seat. I wasn't chasing time anymore. I was letting it walk beside me. And in doing so, I discovered time could be a companion, not a master. I opened the notebook and began to write stories, thoughts, memories. My first entry was simple: today, I chose to feel again. I didn't care if anyone read it. It wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about reconnecting with my dreams, my truth, and my voice. A week later, I met a young man on the jeepney who looked lost. We talked. I listened. I shared the same quote the stranger once gave me. And I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of awakening. Maybe we're all just sparks, passing light to each other in the dark. 4 days, I wondered if I had asked the old man his name. I hadn't. It felt like a missed opportunity. Then I realized maybe that was the point. He wasn't meant to be remembered as someone. He was meant to remind me of something. That wisdom doesn't always have a face, but it always has a purpose. I used to believe life happened in milestones, graduations, promotions, birthdays. But that day on the jeepney taught me life also happens in the cracks, between stops, inside silences, during rainstorms. Now, I don't just ride jeepneys. I live them, each one a story, each stop a chapter, each stranger a lesson waiting to be heard. A few days later, I received a message from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "I saw your name on a blog," she wrote. "Are you writing again?" I paused. I didn't even know people were reading it. That message was more than a reunion, it was a reminder that when we walk in our truth, others notice, even from a distance. I started spending weekends by Manila Bay, notebook in hand. I watched jeepneys whiz by, families share fishbowls, and couples laugh in soft Tagalog whispers. Those scenes became my new curriculum. Life wasn't in theories or offices, it was there, in real people living ordinary days with extraordinary presence. An old Tahoe vendor noticed my notebook. "Write ka?" he asked. I shrugged. "Trying." He smiled and said, "Basta sinusulat moang totu, kahit isa langing magbasa, sapat na." Truth. That word stayed with me. I wasn't chasing followers, I was chasing authenticity. And sometimes, that's harder to earn than fame. One afternoon, I sat beside a soldier returning from Mindanao. He had a faraway look in his eyes. "The hardest battles," he said, "aren't with guns. They're with guilt." We spoke a little after that. But his words stuck. I realized my own war wasn't with the world. It was with who I had become while trying to please it. There's something about jeepney rides at night, the city quieter, the lights softer, the conversations deeper. I began taking them often, even without purpose. They became my therapy sessions, my reflection space. I wasn't escaping life, I was finally learning how to sit with it. Pages turned into dozens, then chapters. Some were joyful, others painful. I wrote about my childhood, my fears, even that moment I broke down in a meeting, but smiled through it. The more I wrote, the more I remembered who I was before I started hiding behind achievements and expectations. I wrote a letter to my father, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't send it, but I wrote it with tears I didn't know I had left. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from fixing relationships, it comes from acknowledging the pain, even if only on paper. A college student sat beside me, nervously reciting lines for a theater audition. I helped her rehearse. "Someday I want to inspire people," she said. I smiled. "You already are." She didn't know it, but her fire relit something in me I thought had gone out. Dreams are contagious if we allow them to spread. I stopped fearing silence. I welcomed it. I spoke to myself in the mirror, not with criticism, but curiosity. "What do you need today?" became my new mantra. That question changed everything. Because before that Jeepney ride, I never gave myself permission to need anything beyond success. I saw someone who looked just like the old man one day, but it wasn't him. Still, I thanked him under my breath. Wherever you are, you started something I'll never forget. Sometimes people come into our lives for just one chapter, yet they shape the entire story. I was offered a new position, a better title, more pay. Old me would have jumped. But this time, I asked myself, will this feed my soul or just my status? I turned it down. Not out of fear, but clarity. My purpose wasn't tied to a paycheck anymore, it was tied to meaning. I retraced the original route of that Jeepney. Same stops. Same traffic. But I saw everything differently now. The chaos was still there, but so was the beauty. Perspective. That was the real transformation. The world didn't change. I did. I was invited to speak at a local storytelling event. I told the Jeepney story, not as a parable, but as a piece of me. People cried, laughed, and hugged me after. "That happened to me, too," one woman whispered. I realized how universal personal stories really are. I started rewriting my goals, not to impress, but to express. Instead of "get promoted," I wrote, "do work that reflects who I am." It wasn't just a career change. It was a philosophy shift. I was finally living in alignment with myself. I picked up my old guitar again. Played poorly. Sang worse. But I laughed harder than I had in years. Joy doesn't need an audience. It just needs permission. And for once, I gave it to myself. One quiet Sunday, I took a walk without a phone, without music. Just me and the wind. A Jeepney passed, and I thought I heard someone shout my name. No one was there. But maybe it wasn't a call from someone else. Maybe it was my spirit calling me forward. A young photographer on a Jeepney took my photo without asking, then apologized. "You looked peaceful," she said. "Like you found something." I smiled. I think I did. I never saw the photo, but I hope it captured what words never could, the quiet revolution inside me. I began mentoring young writers. Not to lecture, but to listen, to share my stumbles and scars. They didn't need a guru. They needed someone real. And that's who I became. Not perfect. Not polished. But real. That was enough. Now, every time I ride a Jeepney, I silently thank the vehicle, the driver, and the strangers. Each one plays a part in someone's story, even if they never know it. Gratitude isn't an event, it's a lens. And once you wear it, even the mess becomes a masterpiece. The old man's notebook is now full. I keep it close, but I've started a new one, blank, waiting, full of potential. Just like I was that morning when I chose the Jeepney. Just like we all are when we choose to let life teach us instead of trying to control every turn. One rainy morning, the driver turned up his radio, and a kundaman played softly through the drizzle. A woman hummed along, eyes closed, voice tender. In that brief moment, I understood the power of sincerity. No filters. No rehearsals. Just raw emotion echoing from the past into the present, and straight into my heart. I found a museum near one of the Jeepney stops. Inside was an exhibit on the origins of the Jeepney, its post-war transformation, its soul of resilience. That's when I realized, the Jeepney wasn't just a vehicle, it was a metaphor for Filipinos. Adaptable. Tough. Beautiful in its chaos. And I was learning to be the same. I missed writing for a few days. Life pulled me back into old patterns, Emails, deadlines, distractions. I felt restless and strangely hollow. It struck me that writing wasn't a luxury anymore. It was medicine. I returned to the page not for performance, but for peace. On one ride, I remembered a friend I ghosted years ago when I was overwhelmed by life. I wrote her an apology, even if I never sent it. Letting go isn't always about forgetting. Sometimes, it's about owning the pain we've caused, even if it lives only in ink. A tricycle driver laughed at how stressed I looked. Kung hindi mo kayang gumiti, baka hindi mo na kayang mabuhay. If you can't smile anymore, maybe you've forgotten how to live. It was harsh but honest. And it reminded me how often truth hides behind humor, and how healing it is to take it with a grin. I visited my old office, just as a guest. The same desks. Same coffee aroma. Same endless hustle. But it didn't pull me in like before. I had outgrown it, not because it was beneath me, but because I finally knew where I truly belonged. Growth isn't just up, it's outward. A woman on the jeepney tapped my shoulder. "Are you the one who wrote that story about a jeepney ride?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled. It saved me from quitting. I was stunned. Something I wrote reached her when she needed it most. That's when I understood. Words can arrive like rescue boats. Passing through a district I hadn't seen in years, I remembered riding here with my Lola. Her hands smelled of Sampaguita, and her laugh filled jeepneys like a hymn. Grief returned, but this time, as a friend, not an intruder. I realized memories don't need to be feared. They're bridges, not burdens. There was an old dream I kept chasing, a company, a title, an identity. But it never brought peace. One morning, I wrote its name on paper, folded it, and let it drift into the bay. That symbolic act didn't change the world. But it changed me. I wasn't quitting, I was choosing something better, freedom. An old woman sat beside me, clutching a black and white photo. "He always sat next to me on this route," she whispered. "Now I ride to remember." Her strength stunned me. Some people ride forward while carrying entire lifetimes with them. That day, I rode in reverence, not just for her love, but for the grace of memory. We hit traffic so bad the driver turned off the engine and lit a cigarette. People groaned, and some got off. I stayed. And I waited. Not with irritation, but awareness. The world doesn't always move at our pace. And maybe that's the lesson. To slow down isn't to fall behind, it's to catch up with yourself. A barefoot boy hopped on, selling Sampaguita. I bought a strand and asked him what he wanted to be. "Pilot," he beamed. "So I can see clouds up close." I wore that strand the whole day. His dream reminded me that hope doesn't ask for perfect conditions, it survives on faith and flowers. With only a few pages left, I began to panic. How do you end a book that changed you? I wanted to write something worthy. Then I laughed. It wasn't the ending that mattered, it was the act of starting again. Blank pages weren't scary anymore, they were sacred. Someone asked me how I learned to enjoy life again. I said, I stopped running ahead in my mind. Presence is a practice. It's choosing to hear the sound of coins dropping in the driver's tray, feel the breeze through open jeepney windows, and notice the laughter you almost missed. I took a jeepney to my grandfather's resting place. Sat beside his grave and read a story aloud, the one about the old man and the notebook. For the first time, I didn't cry. I thanked him for his legacy, his values, his quiet ways. Some conversations don't need replies to be complete. Control was my old armor. Schedules, plans, to-do lists. One ride with a flat tire forced me to cancel everything, and it was the best day I'd had in weeks. The universe wasn't punishing me. It was offering me rest. Surrender doesn't mean failure. It means trust. A man in his 70s handed me a pen. "You look like you're about to write something big," he said. I accepted it, stunned. Sometimes the universe doesn't speak in miracles, it whispers through strangers with unexpected timing. After a year of consistent writing, storytelling, and listening to others, I noticed something strange. I was laughing more. And I wasn't faking it. Healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it giggles softly and sneaks up on you like sunshine after weeks of rain. I realized one day that no matter where I was going, the jeepney ride felt like home. That's when I understood, home isn't a place, it's a state of being. And I had finally arrived in mine. Looking back, I saw how one decision, to take a ride, had redirected my path, not with force, but with subtle grace. I once feared detours. Now I trust them. Because sometimes, they carry you exactly where your soul was always meant to go. A toddler on the jeepney couldn't stop laughing. Nothing in particular caused it, just pure joy. The whole jeepney eventually joined in. That moment reminded me, joy is infectious. And when it starts in the heart of someone unburdened by expectations, it spreads like wildfire across even the most tired souls. I caught my reflection in the jeepney window, noticing the creases, the weariness, the wisdom. I looked older, but more me than ever. For the first time, I didn't critique what I saw. I respected it. That face had earned every line through learning, loving, and letting go. Beside me, an elderly couple rode in silence, but their fingers were entwined like vines. No words. Just presence. I wondered what it takes to grow love like that, weathered and woven into every wrinkle. Maybe it starts with small daily decisions to choose each other, even when life makes noise. I remembered my very first ride as a child, terrified of the noise, clinging to my mother's arm. She had smiled and said, "This is how we move." Funny how that memory returned now, decades later, in a time when I wasn't just moving physically, but spiritually. One day, the driver overheard me talking about a difficult decision. When I got off, he said, "Basta wag mong kalimutang mas mahalaga ang kapayapan kaysa sa tagumpay." Just don't forget peace matters more than success. I never saw him again, but I remember the kindness. Wisdom doesn't always come from books, it often comes from behind the wheel. Someone asked why I was taking jeepneys when I could afford other means. I smiled and said, because they remind me who I am. I no longer needed to explain my path. My journey wasn't built for others' approval, it was built for my own becoming. I began turning off my phone during rides. No distractions. Just me, the world outside, and whatever thoughts dared to rise. Stillness became a friend. It had been waiting patiently for years behind my restlessness. The golden hour hit as we passed over a bridge. Manila Bay glittered like gold coins spilled from the sky. Everyone turned to look. No one spoke. We all just watched. I think we all knew we were in the presence of something holy, even if only for a minute. I invited my mom to take a ride with me again, years after that childhood memory. She was quiet, nostalgic. "I used to pray we'd survive each day," she said. And we had. More than survive, we had grown. That ride was a full circle, a blessing wrapped in exhaust fumes and quiet love. Someone I met at a book club showed me a worn notebook filled with quotes. One of mine was there. Scribbled next to it, "This saved me." I teared up. The words I wrote during my darkest hour had become someone else's flashlight. That's the magic of storytelling. The roof leaked. Water dripped onto my lap. No one complained. We all simply adjusted, shared newspapers, offered tissue, exchanged jokes. Adaptability isn't just a trait, it's a culture. The Philippines didn't teach me how to avoid hardship. It taught me how to carry it with grace. A young priest in training shared the jeepney with me. He spoke softly about faith, not as ritual, but as a relationship. I didn't realize how disconnected I had become from my own spirituality. That day, I began praying again, not with fancy words, but with sincerity. A heavily pregnant woman got on, and without hesitation, 5 of us made space for her. The jeepney shifted like a living organism, adapting to protect one of its own. It was instinctive. That small act reminded me that community isn't built with speeches, it's built with shared space and shared empathy. I sat quietly and started listing things I've survived: heartbreak, failure, doubt, grief. I was still here. Sometimes, the bravest thing isn't fighting, it's continuing. Every jeepney I rode was proof of that I could keep going no matter the bumps. Near Quiapo, I saw a street performer dancing with fire. People clapped, cheered. He bowed deeply, sweat and ash on his face. He performed like his life depended on it. And maybe it did. That kind of passion made me ask, do I burn that brightly for what I love? I rode the jeepney the day I found out a friend had passed. The world looked the same, but I didn't. Grief rode beside me like an invisible passenger. But somehow, the motion soothed me. Life moved on, and gently, so did I. A woman dropped her groceries as she got off. Before she could panic, 3 passengers rushed to help, including me. It felt good to help without being asked. Generosity, like love, is most powerful when it's given freely. The article I wrote, "How a Jeepney Ride Changed My Life," was published. It went viral. But the best part? It resonated with people in silence, not just numbers. Impact doesn't need applause. Just connection. One evening, I saw him again, the man with the notebook. Same eyes. Same Baron. He winked, placed a new blank notebook in my hand, and stepped off without a word. This time, I didn't chase him. I just whispered, "Salamat." Some teachers appear only when you're ready. I stopped using numbers to measure my value. No more followers, no more rankings, no more endless goals. I started measuring peace, joy, presence. And by that measure, I was finally rich. After a downpour, water reached knee level in the streets. The jeepney plowed through, engine roaring, passengers lifting bags and feet. We laughed through it. We made it through. That ride taught me, when you go through floods with good company, you come out stronger on the other side. I started calling jeepneys classrooms. Each ride had a lesson. Each stranger is a potential teacher. I no longer took the jeepney just to arrive, I took it to learn. A man returning from abroad sat beside me. He looked overwhelmed, as if the country had changed while he wasn't looking. We talked. I reminded him, the Philippines is still here, it just grows while you're away. He smiled. He had come home not to a place, but to a feeling. The day before I left for a new city, I took one last jeepney ride through my old route. I touched the handrails, thanked the driver, and silently said goodbye. It wasn't just a farewell to a ride, it was a goodbye to a chapter that made me whole. Today, I am not who I was a year ago. That's what I wrote on the first page of my new notebook. Growth is invisible at first. But one day, you look back, and you barely recognize the person you used to be. Sometimes I took a jeepney with no destination. Just to ride. Just to feel. Not everything has to be productive. Some things just have to be. I hosted my first storytelling event. People shared jeepney stories of love, loss, and laughter. We cried. We laughed. And I realized, this was the dream all along, not fame, but connection. You saved my life with your story, a reader messaged. I cried. Because my pain had become someone else's hope. That's the power of truth, it ripples farther than we ever expect. For once, I let the jeepneys pass and stood still on the sidewalk. Watching. Breathing. Smiling. I didn't need a ride that day. I just needed to witness life and be grateful for it. I flipped through both notebooks. From the first broken thoughts to the final lessons. Every line was a footprint on the road back to myself. The journey wasn't perfect. But it was honest. And that, I've learned it, is the truest path of all. On one quiet afternoon, a boy about 10 sat across from me, messy hair, doodling in a notebook. He reminded me of me. Curious. Sensitive. Hopeful. I smiled, wondering what I'd say to that version of myself. Keep dreaming, I whispered in my head. You're going to get lost, but you'll find more than you ever expected. I wrote a letter to him. The stranger who started it all. I wrote as if he would read it, though I knew he probably never would. Thank you, I wrote, for seeing me before I saw myself. For handing me a notebook instead of advice. For reminding me that stillness speaks louder than noise. There was one final ride I took with no conversation, no thoughts, no reflection. Just motion. Just peace. Just being. Sometimes, silence says everything. That ride was the answer to all the questions I had once scribbled in fear. Am I enough? Am I on the right path? And the answer was, yes. I saved the last page of the new notebook for something special. I wrote, in bold letters, I have arrived. Not at a location, but at a version of myself I could finally love. It wasn't the end of the road. But it was the end of wandering in the wrong direction. As I waited by the roadside for another jeepney, I watched people come and go. Some rushing. Some calm. All on their own journeys. And then I smiled, because I knew, I'm ready for the next ride. Not because I have all the answers, but because now, I trust the questions. Moral of the story. Sometimes, the smallest decisions, like choosing a jeepney over a taxi, can become turning points that reroute our entire lives. Growth doesn't always happen on mountain peaks. It happens in motion, in silence, in strangers, in detours. When you slow down, open your heart, and truly listen, even the most ordinary rides can become the most extraordinary transformations.